Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's session, we are going to discussing about one more service type which is called NodePort. If you are keen on Kubernetes, DevOps or cloud, then this video is going to clear a very big concept for you because many people understand pod, many people understand service. However, when it comes to NodePort, confusion always starts. So in this video, we will see what is NodePort, why we need this NodePort service, how exactly the traffic flow will happen into the NodePort service, and eventually we will see one real-time use case where the NodePort service it can be useful, and finally we will see the live demo. This is where today's session becomes very practical and very clear. So let's start. First, understand the situation where the node port will be useful. In Kubernetes, your application is running inside a pod and pod has its own IP. However, pod IP is dynamic, internal to the cluster and changes when the pod restart or new pod created. So basically, you can't give pod IP to the end users. So for that, Kubernetes introduced service. Service gives a VIP, which is called virtual IP. Now, inside the cluster, everything is fine. Pods can talk, service can talk. However, what if you want to access your application from outside the cluster? That is where node port comes into the picture. Now, what is a node port? Node port is a type of Kubernetes service like a cluster IP. When you create a service with the type as a node port, Kubernetes does something special for you. That is, it opens one port on every node inside the Kubernetes cluster. That port range should be 30,000 to 32,767. Of course, Kubernetes will either automatically pick one port or you can define one port from this range. So time being, what we can see, whatever the port automatically opens by the Kubernetes, with that only we can try to access this application. So in the later, when we can do the project, that time we can try to define how to define the port with this range. This is where node port becomes very important because now your application is not only inside the cluster, it is also accessible using node IP colon node port. That we will see it now. Now, the most important part in the node port is how the complete flow of node port will work. So this is where let's see exact flow of the node port. In the step one, we will see user access the application using node IP colon port number. Basically, this is the entry gate. This is where the traffic enters. In the step two, Kubernetes already opened this node port on every node automatically. So it doesn't matter which node you hit. That is where high availability starts. In the step three, request first reaches the node port service. However, node port service is not the final destination. It forwards the traffic to the service VIP, which is called virtual IP. So now flow becomes first node IP colon port number, then service IP. In the step 4, we will see service now checks it's the selector. In the selector, we supposed to give the name, which is called label name. And it chooses one of the matching parts. Since service has the built-in load balancing, traffic is distributed across the parts. That we will see how to do the load balancing using the service. In the step 5, eventually the request reaches to the pod, then the container, and then the application responds accordingly. And the response goes back the same way, like pod, service, node, then finally user will get it. So this is the full node port workflow. Okay, so this is where you should always park this concept in your mind. So first user hit the application URL, then it will go to the node port, then it will go to the service, then it will go to the pod, then container, and finally application will respond. So when you create a node port service, what Kubernetes does internally? So the Kubernetes does internally open the same port on all the worker nodes, which and all there in the Kubernetes cluster, and it configures the networking rules, and then it links the node port to the service VIP, and finally service VIP to the pods. Okay, so despite of your accessing a node IP, you are actually accessing a service, not a pod. That is why service are very important objects into the Kubernetes. Now let's watch the live demo. There are two manifest files are there. One is pod manifest file and second one is the node port manifest file, which is called service YAML file. First, we will see the service YAML file, what and all configured. Now here see kind, where we are using service, and then type. Here we are using node port as a service type. Then the port is 80 and the target port also 80. And make sure here very important thing is selectors. The selectors we are selecting as a web apps. The parts which has the label as web apps. So automatically this service will be discovered and route the traffic. Now let's look at the pod.yaml also. The label should be same. Here see web apps. So everything should be same. Then the image we have selected as a HTTPD. We are deploying Apache Tomcat and I was using two replicas. So let's apply this kubectl apply -f pod.yaml kubectl get parts -watch. Now it is creating and it is running. Kubectl get parts. There are two parts are running. So that configuration we have given a replica is equal to 2. Then kubectl apply -f nodeport.yaml kubectl get svc. This is called service. See nodeport service is created. See the port is automatically opened by the Kubernetes, which is from 30,000 to 32,676. That means this is where Kubernetes mapped your service to the node port. So, and one more very important thing is you need to remember, if you are running Kubernetes on cloud, which is AWS, Azure, or GCP, anyway, we are using Minikube, which is running on AWS. You must allow this port in security group or firewalls 31,634, or you can allow the range also. That will helpful when we are working with that multiple deployments. Let me show you. I already configured this. You can go to that AWS. See, this is my server which is running on AWS. So here you can go to the security and here you can click on security group name. This is the security group, and make sure you should have to allow the rules, which is port. And now see here, I have allowed here 30,000 to 32,676. Here I configured for Kubernetes services port range. If you are not configured this port range, then node port will work inside but not from the browser, which is called outside the cluster. So this is where many people get stuck. So please make sure you should have to configure in the security group the port range. Now let's access it from the internal and then we'll access it from the outside of the cluster. kubectl get parts -o wide, we will get that IP addresses of the pod. So internally we already known curl curl IP address of the pod, then a port number we are giving 80. See, it was working. Then again we are trying to access from the pod 2. See, both are working. In the both parts we are deployed Apache. Okay. Now what we can do, kubectl get svc, you can take, this is the node port and this is the port number. We can take this port number. You can go to the browser, take the public DNS or public IP of this cluster, curl if config.me. See, this is the IP of the this cluster, and go to the browser. You can open the port. enter. Now see, it works. Okay. Now thing is, as we discussed just now, this service will do the load balancing also. How to identify whether it is doing the load balancer or not? For that, we need to modify some configurations. So let's see that. kubectl get parts, kubectl exec, then we can give the pod name, then -it -bin/bash. We are inside of the first pod. So here what we can do, echo, then this is the pod one, go to /usr local apache to htdocs index.html. This was taking default location, which is from /usr local apache to htdocs index.html. This is the location it is picking up. From there, whatever the message is available, it is printing. So now what we can do, there we are inserting to identification. This is a part one. Okay. Now same thing we can do for the part two also, because we need to understand how this load balance will work. So that purpose for identification we are doing. So here also we can do the same case. Instead of pod 1, we are putting pod 2 here. Now we done the configuration for the both parts. Now we will see curl space IP of the first pod colon 80. So now see, this is the part 1, and again second part also we are going to see, this is the part 2. Now let's see how the load balancer will work in the service. Now if you can go to the browser and you can refresh, it will go to the part 1, and you can refresh again, it will go to the part 2. That is how load balance will work. So as a user, you don't have to worry about which one accessing. So it's doing the load balancing. So that is how, as a user, with help of service, you can access it your application within the cluster or outside the cluster. At the same time, you don't have to worry about which pod you are accessing, because service will do the load balancing also. So let's see how it will do it. Now, if we can go to here, just refresh it. Now you can see here, it is printing as a pod 1. That means the service will be redirect the traffic to pod 1. Now what we can do, if we can refresh it again, now it will go to the pod 2. See here, now it is switched to the pod 2. See again, let's go back to the pod 1. So this is how the service will do the load balancing also. So that is how service is very important object in Kubernetes, where it will help you to access all your pods within the cluster or outside the cluster as well. It also going to do a load balancing of your pods. Okay. Now let's talk about one real-time use cases where the NodePort will help us. This is very important for interviews and project explanation as well. So use case is internal application testing. Suppose your company built a new application, developers has to deploy it on Kubernetes. QA team wants to test it, production team wants to see it. However, it is not production, load balancer is not approved, ingress is not designed, it's only for internal testing. This is where NodePort is the best choice to do all those things. What teams do, create a NodePort service, allow the port in firewalls, which we done in the security groups, shared NodeIP :nodeport with the team. Now everyone can access the application from the browser. Why companies choose NodePort here? Basically, very quick to set up this. Since no external load balancer is needed here, pretty much perfect for dev environment and QA environment and CI environment. That is where this can be very easy to set up in the dev or QA or CI environment. Eventually, when application moves to the production, they replace NodePort with the load balancer or ingress service based on the requirement. So despite of advanced options, NodePort is still very useful when we are doing this type of testing. So if someone asks, where do you use this NodePort in real time? You can say NodePort is mostly used for internal access, development testing, proof of concepts, which is POC, temporary exposure of applications, and cluster level debugging. That is where NodePort is fits perfectly in all these cases. So coming to the summary, so today you will learn what is a NodePort, why we need it, how traffic flows will happen in the NodePort, what Kubernetes configures, and one real-time use cases we have seen actually. If you understood this, Kubernetes networking will become much easier. So if this video helped you, could you please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends, because Kubernetes is not about commands. This is where understanding architectures matter actually. See you in the next video. Thank you very much.